and welcome back to Cooking the Books with me, Gilly Smith, the podcast which takes us through 4 food moments from the books of our favourite food writers. It's about life through the prism of food. And this week we're with Nicola Lamb, one of the nominees of this year's Jane Grigson Trust Award for Best Debut Food Writer.
Whether it's baked cheesecake, whether it's cannelé, whether it's laminated brioche, whether it's lemon drizzle, it's a huge range. And I always loved the idea of picking apart each recipe and being able to ask the question why.
Her book, Sift, is an extraordinarily accomplished first book by a baker trained in London and New York by the best, Ottolenghi, Dominique, Ansel, and little bread Pedlar. Her Substack kitchen projects was praised as an incredible resource by The Observer. Her recipes have been featured in Serious Eats, The Guardian, Olive, Vogue and ESMagazine, and she hosts sell-out pastry parties with her pop-up bakery, Lark. I started by taking her back to the JGTs, a party that was filled with the luminaries of the food world, to ask her how it felt to be among the 3 most feted debut writers of the year.
It was really exciting. It was great to meet you, and you sort of showed me the ropes of the event, actually, which was nice. You sort of said, okay, the judges are there. They're trying not to give anything away. So I will always be grateful for you, Gilly, for showing me around.
Go and talk to that person. Go and talk to that
exactly.
person. Yes. I've got a great picture of you, actually, with Claudia Roden and Elizabeth Luard, and all of you are kind of heads together. And I thought, what a wonderful moment.
Yes, the wine definitely fortified my ability to go and talk to these legends. I mean, it was so special. I think I said it to you on the night, but I'll say it again here, that my identity as a writer is, and this sounds so pretentious, oh my goodness, but this is this thing that you start battling with, where you go, I don't feel like a writer. I feel like a chef who just wants to teach. And so the idea of being writerly is this really foreign concept to me in a way. And so this idea that I was at a writing award, whereas I feel like, if I got nominated for a cake award, I'd be much more, I'd sort of get it a bit more. But being in a room where someone's saying, oh, you're an author, you're a writer, it's still something that I have to get used to. So it was really special. And it was a moment where I had to kind of say to myself, look, you are a writer. So it was an amazing evening to have that moment of going, okay, this is happening now. The book's coming. Yeah, it's real.
Yeah, it's a real validation, isn't it? Because, of course, everyone goes in there with their imposters arm in arm.
Totally.
And, a lot of people don't get over that. I have to say, Elizabeth Luard, whenever she comes down to the writers' retreats as our muse in residence, and everybody's going, oh, I shouldn't be here because you're all so amazing. She goes, oh, for God's sake, what's the matter with everybody? What is this imposter syndrome? She's the only person who doesn't actually have it.
Yes, she's brilliant. She was like, you must send me a book. And I said, yes, Elizabeth, absolutely. I'll do it right now. Exactly. It's an honour to even imagine my book being in her collection. Crazy.
Well, exactly. So the book is just about to come out. You're standing on the precipice, looking out. What do you want this book to do for you? Will it make you turn from chefing to writing, or will you always have that balance?
I think it's always going to be really important to me to feed people in person and to have that connection. Obviously, I feed my neighbours and my friends and people in my local neighbourhood with all of my tests. But I think that there will always be an element of my life where it's going to be feeding people in person, whether that's pop-ups or collaborations. I think that connection that you have with people, and that's the reason that I got into cooking in the first place, especially pastry. My friend asked me yesterday, why did you pick pastry and not cooking? And we talked about that sort of moment of celebration and joy that people associate with dessert. And that's just so special. You can make someone feel so special when you make them a cake, or you take them a muffin if they're not feeling well, or you have cookies in the freezer or something like that. And so that will always be a really important part of what I do. And your question saying, what will this precipice, what do I hope it will do for me? Honestly, I haven't thought that much about what it will do for me. I'm really just thinking about hopefully what my book Sift will do for other people. The biggest thing that I have is that I'm really hoping that this book helps make other people's baking books better in a way, because what I'm trying to do is explain all of those questions that maybe you are too afraid to ask, or if you want to look up if you can use a different sugar, or you're missing the flour that the recipe says. These are the lessons that I want to teach. So I'm really, really hopeful that my cookbook will help you feel more confident in other books. I'm hoping that someone will have a Pierre Hermé book and they'll go, oh, I never felt like I could make millefeuille, but maybe if I check a few of the sort of tips and tricks that's in Sift, then you can feel confident and sort of bolstered to be able to go forth and make things in your kitchen that you hadn't really imagined were possible.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, you absolutely do set yourself out as a teacher. You, right from the introduction, you say, this is about the magic of baking, and it's about learning to ask why through the lens of science. The first part of the book is absolutely everything anybody would ever need to know about every baking technique that I have ever heard and not heard of. And it is all easy science, really accessible, beautiful. Typography really makes it accessible. There's pictures, there's diagrams and all of that stuff. And I immediately went to the recipes because the world is split into two types of people, one who bakes and one who doesn't. And I am not a baker, and I have really tried, and I've written a lot about this. I cannot bake, and that is because I will not follow rules.
That doesn't surprise me somehow, Gilly.
I just can't do it. I have no patience whatsoever. And you joke about getting upset about the ganache splitting 2 hours before the dinner party. The ganache! There's no way that I am ever going to make a ganache for anyone. But then I look at the recipe for the ganache and I go, yeah, I can do that. And I did do the Leith's course, and I made plenty of lovely things, but I wouldn't choose to.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's too hard, and that's not what feeding is to me, but it is to you. I went through some of those recipes and I could absolutely follow every single one of them.
That is a credit to my amazing design team, I have to say, and to my publishers for letting me put so many words in. I said, we simply can't lose that step. They were very, very generous with how much space they gave us.
For example, you would take the lemon basque cheesecake with sticky lemons. Yum. I could look up the Maillard reaction, never heard of it, the egg coagulation and the liaison batter techniques. Or I could just follow the recipe. It's up to me.
That is exactly what I wanted it to be. I wanted this book to be something that you could dip into if you had an afternoon. That's actually how I've divided the recipes. Rather than by type, it's by how long they take to make. So, for example, there's an afternoon, a day, and a weekend. Also, because I'm not going to lie to you about how long it takes to make things. I think if you want to make opera cake, I'm going to be there with you every step of the way, but just don't stress yourself out. Give yourself 3 days. I mean, honestly, you can look at each recipe has a timeline, and it's possible that you can squash it down if you really were desperate to make it in less time. But I really want to give people the best chance of success. And I think also a lot of people go to their baking books when they have an afternoon off. Maybe not you, Gilly, but some people find baking very relaxing. And they'll go, wow, I have a day free. What shall I make? And I really like the idea of people being able to use this as a bit of a meditation, something to be able to bring them a bit of joy. They can say, oh, I've got a couple of hours. What can I make? And then, as you say, the recipes also have a reference back to the front section. So if your cake is in the oven and you go, what actually is a Maillard reaction? Then there's a page reference, so you can go back, and whilst your cake is baking, you can bolster yourself with this information. In the same way that you can even do it the other way, where you could be reading the front section of the book and learning and just kind of reading it page to page. Even though it is very technical, I have tried to make it enjoyable to read. It is a sort of casual tones. There is some sort of sciencey stuff, but I've tried to present it in a way that feels not scary. And then you can kind of see dotted throughout the front section is, this is where you can see this technique in action. So the recipes and the reference refer to one another. So yeah, I'm hoping people use it in their own unique ways. I've suggested ways you can use it, but that's really exciting to me.
I mean, it's a very generous book. I mean, you've basically given away all the secrets that you must have taken years to learn. And it's also a very ambitious book. It sets itself up as a baking Bible. I can't imagine that you'd get any more information anywhere else. It is literally the companion for anyone who really wants to go deep, as I say, or just to make some of these amazing recipes. But I think it is a book for people who really do want to go deep, and it's beautiful as well. For somebody as young as you, Nicola, how did you manage to take that deep breath and say, I'm just going to jump off the deep end and do the biggest book of everything that I've ever known. I mean, that for your very first book.
I know. Well, I think it actually stems from being a massive cookbook fan. And I think that when I first conceived of writing a book, I was talking to my agent who had seen my Substack. And my Substack was sort of, I guess this book is an extension of my Substack. And what I do in my Substack every week is I deep dive a specific recipe, whether it's baked cheesecake, whether it's cannelé, whether it's laminated brioche, whether it's lemon drizzle. It's a huge range. And I always loved the idea of picking apart each recipe and being able to ask the question why. And so then when it came to writing a cookbook, I knew that I wanted to put all of those findings that I'd been researching over a few years in my Substack and or passing on the information that so many brilliant chefs and teachers had told me, standing next to me whilst I was mixing a brioche, those kinds of tips. I was finding it hard to find them online. And so that is always what I wanted to do, to teach and pass on. And even though the idea of writing a cookbook that's just sort of like 100 beautiful baking recipes, I think those are brilliant. And I think there's definitely a way to make a book like that is just really appealing and enjoyable to read and to write. But I knew that for my own book, I really wanted it to just be more than that. I don't know why. I think maybe it's this imposter thing. Maybe I feel like, I need to throw everything at the wall for it to be meaningful. But genuinely, this is the book that I wish that I'd had when I started baking. When I first started in the kitchen, I found that the two types of pastry books you could get were either, as we say, 100 beautiful recipes, which I loved, or they were these incredibly dense, information-rich books that were aimed at professionals. And these books are brilliant, but they have things like 50 kilos of croissant dough, or you're learning how to make these huge batch sizes. So I really wanted to create a book that was somewhere in between those, somewhere that had all of that information, but displayed in a way that was much more welcoming, like those more beautiful pastry books.
Yeah, and it absolutely works. I mean, take me out of the equation. I know plenty of people who would love this book. It is exactly what you need. And again, I go back to the style, and it's so beautiful, but it's really easy to follow. Passing the torch is your first food moment, actually, the ricotta, marmalade and hazelnut chocolate chip cake. And you say it's a perfect example of just what you were talking about. It's that it's the community that is involved in learning. Why did you choose this one?
So this is ideation on a recipe that was shown to me and that I used to make most weeks when I was working at a bakery called Little Bread Pedlar that's in Bermondsey. This was a bakery job that really changed my life. It was the place where I learned to make croissants. It's the place where I learned to make sourdough and also make some really beautiful cakes. And even though seasonality is commonplace now, and I think people eat with the seasons, I had never actually worked somewhere before then because I'd mainly been working in patisserie type places, which were amazing. But this was the first place where, when wild garlic season was there, we would use wild garlic the entire time. Nicola Gensler, whose recipe the ricotta marmalade chocolate chip cake is based on, she would bring in bin bags full of nettles and things from her garden, stuff that she'd taken off a lemon verbena bush from her friend's garden. And it was actually quite life-changing. And this was in sort of 2015, 2016. So even though now we see wild garlic everywhere come April, it wasn't as common then. And so Nicola had a really brilliant way of sharing her passion, sharing the slow ways to do things, and also encouraging you to make versions of recipes that she was sharing with you. And so, as I've said, this is kind of the passing the torch moment for me. So this is my take on a recipe that she gave to me. And I'm hoping that someone will make this recipe and then think, oh, I'm going to try a walnut version, or I'm going to try using a different cheese or a different flavoring. I'm going to do a much more lemony one rather than an orange one. I'm going to use this preserve. And so I really think it's so important to say thank you to the teachers and to all of the people that have passed you on recipes and pass on those lessons. I think that's I think that's one of the most important jobs you do when you're writing a book and when you're trying to teach, is making sure that you're paying homage to the people that have taught you. And yeah, so I love this cake. It's also just a delicious cake, I have to say. Like, there's all of this story behind it, but what it is just this really rich, dense, almost like a cheesecake. It's half cheesecake, half cake, but also nuts. And it's very, very Moorish, and that marmalade glaze is killer. I think maybe you should make this one, Gilly. I think this one...
Do you know what? You've just sold it. Absolutely. I mean, you got me at the story. We talk a lot about authenticity on this show. We talk a lot about, third culture, mashing up and, making up your story on the basis of all your matriarchs before you and all the people who've been in your life. And that is what a recipe is. It's a recipe that travels, isn't it? Totally. It's a story of food that travels. It might have started at your grandmother's hands, and you bring all your ideas to it, and it becomes different all the time. But it has what this one is. It feels like you're enabling people by giving them a base, some good information about how to make something delicious, and then enabling them to do what they want with it and take it on to the next stage. What you do with your second food moment is you say it's okay to make mistakes. And I love this. I love the way that you say in the introduction that the difference between baking and kind of cooking is that you can go wrong so much more with baking, and maybe that's what I feel about baking. And you say, we'd throw away curdled eggs, but you'd serve up a dry roasted chicken with a bit of an apology. Yeah. And this second one is panna cotta with burnt white chocolate and soy, and it started as a complete accident. So this is what you can do when you have the confidence actually just to kind of say, okay, fair enough. I'm going to do a bit of a Massimo Bottura on this one.
Totally. Oh, that oops, I dropped the lemon tart. What an iconic dessert. So, yes, I think another difference between baking and cooking is that people taste less as they go along. Of course, raw eggs, raw flour, I get that we shouldn't be, taking a big spoonful of it as you would like a soup as you're cooking it. But I think people are quite quick to discredit things or mistakes that happen in the baking kitchen without giving them a taste and just actually trying to see it from a sort of non-judgmental eye before you just throw it in the bin. And completely, I think you have this different expectation. Baking is supposed to bring joy. A cake is supposed to make you happy. So serving one that is less than perfect feels awful and criminal to some people. So I totally get that. This recipe, yes, I did leave in and I did develop as a reminder that good things can come from bad, even in baking. My amazing food stylist, Holly Cochran, who worked on this book, she has worked on so many beautiful books. She is an amazing baker and knows so much about baking, and it was amazing to work with her. I sent her recipes for our very first shoot. One of them was a blonde white chocolate. That's when you slowly cook white chocolate until it goes all golden and sort of has these beautiful maillard. Your favourite new word, Gilly? All of these maillard-y flavours. It sort of tastes toasted. And I sent her the recipe and she very diligently followed what I said. And even though I think in her mind she'd gone, I think this might be the wrong temperature. But she said, no, I'm going to trust Nicola. Maybe she's got something in mind here that I'm not expecting. Anyway, she then messaged me about half an hour later because we were texting about the chocolate. And she goes... Is this what you meant? And she sent me this photograph. I'll never forget it. It was this sort of mahogany brick of burnt chocolate. And I thought, no, that isn't exactly what I'd been imagining. I was imagining this beautiful golden, supple piece of chocolate. And she said, well... okay, I think you might have got the temperature wrong. But what I'll do is I'll bring this in so we can taste it. And so the next day, she brought it in and she sort of fished this brick out of her bag and we tasted it. And we were all amazed at how delicious it was. It was so umami and rich. And I love sort of dark burnt flavors. Like I really love like a dark but baguette that's got a real crust to it. So for me, it really, really appealed to me. And we tasted it and I thought, okay, I'm going to take this home with me. And then for the next shoot, I'm going to see what I can do in the meantime. And that's when I developed this recipe. And rather than throwing away that burnt chocolate, it became the star of this recipe. And I'm really proud of that recipe.
So what did it look like then? So we've got, let me just remind you that everyone of the recipe title, it's panna cotta with burnt white chocolate and soy. The burnt chocolate then sort of sits in the middle. How does it work?
So yes, the burnt white chocolate is a garnish. So you grate it on top. And so we make this very, very milky panna cotta. It's using evaporated milk and condensed milk. I actually developed the recipe so you literally open a few tins and you don't have to mess around with measuring. It's probably one of the most simple ratio-based recipes in the book. You just crack open a tin of condensed milk, a couple of tins of evaporated milk, use your gelatin, set it, and then you burn this white chocolate and you just grate it on top. And it looks very unassuming. And I love a very, very softly set panna cotta, so soft that it almost, like as soon as it goes into your mouth, just kind of melts. It obviously has a great wobble, but when you outturn it, it just completely flumps under its own weight. And then you put the burnt white chocolate on top. And then to really push this dish to the most extreme, because I thought we're burning the white chocolate, a little bit of soy sauce is so amazing on top. It creates this complex mixture of umami, sort of not bitter, but then there's still sweetness from the white chocolate, but it just has this incredible toastiness. And it is actually a bit of a flavour bomb, to be honest.
Amazing. Soy. Is this from your heritage? Your third food moment is an homage to your heritage. Your dad was born in Shanghai but grew up in Hong Kong. I mean, is soy part of your kind of your flavour bombs largely because of the way that you grew up, do you think?
Yeah, I think I am obsessed with soy sauce. I will put it on anything. I put it in everything, whether I'm making a tomato sauce for pasta or whatever, a soup or a stew, there's always soy sauce in there. It has such an incredible sort of saline base, but just gives it that little bit of extra. I mean, I have a tomato tarte tatin recipe in the book, and that uses a little bit of soy sauce as well. Soy sauce is one of those secret things if you don't just want straight salty flavour. So it is definitely something that we cooked with a lot growing up. My dad would make spaghetti aglio oily, the garlic spaghetti, and that would have soy sauce in it. So there was always soy sauce in everything. So I think it is definitely a bit of a comfort ingredient. Here's a tip for you, Gilly, actually. My friend Claire told me this. Soy sauce on vanilla ice cream. That is amazing. And actually,
I'm trying it tonight.
Yeah, you have to. I think you're going to absolutely love it. So definitely soy sauce with everything. So it is used in the book in less traditional ways, like with fennel and tomatoes in the tarte tatin, and also with this panna cotta. But then it is used in a, I suppose, more traditional way. I think there is a little bit in that burnt spring onion oil in the in that babka that you've mentioned.
Yeah, well, let's go into that. So this is milk bread spring onion babka. So tell us a little bit about growing up, how your dad would kind of introduce you to a lot of his kind of food.
It was so easy to love what he was cooking because it was so good. He would always cook really, really classic, I suppose, more kind of Cantonese dishes, whether it was crispy noodles with beef or chicken, or he would do these pork chops cooked in like a dark soy sugar sauce. And everything that he did was very, he was definitely making it child friendly, I suppose, in a way. And we'd always be excited for him to cook. My parents were very equal in the amount of cooking that they did. And so my dad would cook a couple of times a week, and it would always be a Chinese meal. Occasionally it would be the spaghetti with some Chinese influences in it, but those were that was his wheelhouse, yeah. It was,
and then it became your creation.
Yes, so this marries together two of my sort of dad's heritages, I suppose. So he was born in Shanghai, and burnt spring onion oil or scallion oil, I think, is the more, if you wanted to search a recipe, that's quite traditional for Shanghai cooking, where you actually burn spring onions in the oil and add a bit of flavouring, and then you serve it often cold, and it's a really deep, again, umami, complex flavour. It is delicious, usually with some sesame seeds on top as well, or maybe some sesame oil. And my dad would make this every now and again, and it would always blow my mind. I thought it was so delicious. But my dad did grow up in Hong Kong, and Hong Kong is much more famous for those fluffy cakes and breads and that Hong Kong style bakery. So in this recipe, I married together those two things from his upbringing and from his past and those flavors that we both love together. Like, he always loved the cheapest white supermarket bread growing up. I mean, we didn't have a Chinese bakery in Brighton, which is where I grew up, but I think that was the closest thing to him. He didn't want to mess around with sourdough. He didn't have time for that. He'd always want like the whitest, springiest bread. So this was a real kind of mixture of those two things that we love together, all wrapped up and twisted up and baked. And it's a really great bread that you can eat as a slice. I think it would make a really good grilled cheese sandwich, actually. I think that would be cool. I haven't tried it, but I think it would work.
I think it would too. Your final food moment is the coriander seed and panela cake with honey cream cheese and apricots, which you took
Such a long title. Oh my goodness.
But you took it to meet your publishers. Now, I remember when I was working at a radio station, I worked at GLR in the glory days, it's now BBC London, but, you know, people would not just send a press release, they would send cakes, they would send all sorts of presents to get whatever they wanted.
Yes.
And this is what you did. So you went to your publishers with your cake. Was this basically a proposal to eat?
Yes, it was definitely a proposal, along with my proposal, the proposal in every meaning. So I wrote my proposal and we sent it out to publishers, and then my amazing agent, Emily Sweet, she's brilliant, and I'm so thankful that she came across my Substack all those years ago. She set up these meetings, and I thought, I have to bake for them. Like, I have to, because even if they think that my proposal sounds good, I have to cook for them. How else will they know that I'm not a complete, charlatan? I have to bring them cake. So I decided on a cake to make, and I wanted to make them something really, really classic, but with a few little twists. And I'm quite careful about putting twists in recipes. I think that I don't want to do things just for the sake of it or just to be interesting. But coriander seed is one of those things that you might have in your cupboard that you overlook, but it's so brilliant. It's brilliant in potatoes, it's brilliant in spice rubs, and it's actually brilliant in cake as well. It has a sort of slightly lemony, floral, kind of not quite sure what that flavour is if you put it in anything. And marrying that together with delicious panela sugar, which is a raw cane sugar, just came together in like a really nice little package, and it worked. I got a book deal. And here we are today talking about it.
It comes out on the 2nd of May, which, of course, is the Fortnum and Masons Award.
I know! What a great day for a book to come out.
What would it mean to you if 2025 you were approaching the first anniversary of Sift and you were nominated for a Fortnum and Mason Award? It's likely, it's the kind of book that they do love at the Fortnum and Masons. What does it mean to you to be fated?
Gosh, I don't. It was funny. I was actually messaging with someone who has been nominated, Phil Curry. Amazing book, A New Way to Bake, such a brilliant vegan baking book. And he said, "Oh, it might be you next year." And I said, "No, Phil, it won't. It won't. I don't believe it." I would be very, very surprised, very honoured and flattered, but...
I mean, well, how would it change your life? Because I know that you watch all these people on Instagram. These people are elevated by those awards. They are given, TV space. They are given more books to write. What's the next opportunities that you want to be given?
I'm very, the thing that I always come back to, and this is something that I learned from my parents, and also I've learned from people that I look up to. I really want a very sustainable career. I want to be writing, and I want to be experimenting, and I want to be curious about cooking for as long as possible. I love the idea of, I know that there are these certain moments that can lift and elevate you, but I want to always know that I can be doing this for a long time. So if something like that, an award, can help longevity, then that is my goal. That is my ultimate goal.
Thanks for listening. Head over to my Substack to try out her ricotta, marmalade and hazelnut chocolate chip cake from her food moments. And I'll see you next week.